This is Chapter 21, Safety and Security. You can follow along in your textbook. Older adults are less likely to seek any kind of formal and informal help when they're affected by some kind of natural disaster, whether that be fire, flood, tornado. So that's something you need to know, is that they are not as likely to seek help. One type of safety, there's several different types of safety that are listed in this chapter, but one is environmental safety. This is a safe environment and is one in which one is capable with reasonable caution of carrying out activities of daily living and IADLs, as well as activities that enrich one's life without fear of attack, accident, or any kind of interference. Home safety is one type of safety. It's multifaceted and it has to be individualized depending on what the different risks are for each patient. This becomes particularly important if the patient is at risk for falls, and there is actually a suggestion of an occupational therapist coming into the home to do like fall safety risks, and there's different types of assessments. But what they found is that a lot of people have not done these types of home safety. So prior to discharging someone home from the hospital, you need to think about what kind of home safety environment they're going into. Crimes in older adults, risks and vulnerability. Living alone definitely puts an older adult at risk or makes them vulnerable for crimes. Decreased mobility, any kind of memory impairments, and then also being lonely. This makes the elderly more susceptible to crime. Property crime is the most common crime against people 65 years and older. And if you, they're also, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, but also they're at risk for fraud and scams. But if you look on box 21-2, there's some different crime reduction suggestions for the elderly, such as when they're walking, stay in a well-lit area, don't dangle the purse away from their body, carry only what they need. So these are good tips just for anyone. In the car, making sure the door is always locked when they are in or out of the car. Check the front and back seat before entering, and if the car breaks down, turn on emergency flashers, raise the hood, get back in the car, lock the door, and wait for help. And then at home, not opening the door automatically, drawing the blinds, locking the doors, windows, and garage door, and then leave lights on when going out at night. And be wary of unsolicited offers to make repairs to the home. Don't hesitate to report crimes, and then organize a buddy system. So just good tips really for everyone, but especially for the elderly. Crimes against older adults. Fraudulent schemes are really common among the elderly, and I think this is because the elderly tend to be trusting. They usually own their own home, and then oftentimes have financial resources. So fraud against elders range from solicitations to what seems like a worthwhile charity, and then all the way to a request for a cash deposit to win a prize. There is such a thing as medical fraud, and your book talks about medical supplies that are promised and that they pay for but then never delivered, and also fraud with Medicare. And the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have offices that are trying to keep up with this, but people will call in and try to access their Medicare information and get money that way. If you look in your textbook in box 21-3, there's some different examples for protection against fraud. Some suggestions: search online for the contact information and the proposed offer. Resist the pressure to act quickly. So call the police if you feel like there's danger to yourself. Be careful of unsolicited phone calls. Never give or send any personally identifiable information. Make sure that antivirus and security software are up to date. So it's just again, good safety tips for everyone, but sometimes the elderly don't know that they need this, so we have to help them to know what resources that they're needing. Fire-related mortality rates are 3 times higher in people that are over the age of 80 than in the rest of the population, so fire safety for elders is an area of concern. Most fires occur at home during the night, and most of the deaths aren't actually from the fire, but are often related to smoke injury more than burns. Smoking materials are the most common causes of residential fires. Plastic articles and other things can create fumes that are deadly. So, and also you want to check out box 21.1. There are some fire safety, fire prevention facts that are listed in that segment of your textbook. Vulnerability to environmental temperatures. The extremes in temperature are a serious risk to older people with declining health. And one thing that your textbook says is that heat and cold related deaths increase with age, particularly for those age 75 and older. So we really need to be aware in this population of extreme temperatures. And unfortunately, in Kansas, we have very extreme temperatures, anywhere from very, very cold to very, very hot. So this does make this population more susceptible. So preventative measures, whether that be for the hot or the cold, are really important and crucial, because the inability to thermoregulate with these temperatures can be lethal to this age group. Thermoregulation, there are some neurosensory changes in thermoregulation delay or diminish the individual's awareness of temperature changes, and may impair behavioral and thermoregulatory responses to dangerously high or low temperatures. So in other words, the person may not be able to, with their sensory system, they may not be able to detect when it's really cold or when it's really hot as much as they used to. For example, they may be in a hot room, but they're feeling cold, so they're wearing a sweater even though it's hot in the room, because they just don't have the ability for the neurosensory. They have neurosensory changes. So needing to be aware of that with the elderly. There are drugs that can affect thermoregulation and their ability to regulate temperature. And then economic, behavioral, and different environmental factors can create a really dangerous environment for the older person. Temperature monitoring, it's really important to monitor the temperature of the older adults. Up to a third of older people that have acute infections may not have a fever with it. So this can lead to a delay in diagnosis and appropriate treatment, as well as increased morbidity and mortality. And I know I've said this before, but like young children, they have big immune systems, so they have big immune system responses. So they may have a slight illness and then have a very large fever because they have big immune responses. And it's the opposite for the elderly. They may be very sick and their body doesn't produce that kind of a response. So we need to be aware of that. For example, a temperature of 98.6 could indicate fever in a frail older adult. Hyperthermia is when the body temperature increases above a normal range because of environmental or metabolic heat loads, environmental being an outside source and the metabolic being an internal source. This is administration, so people taking diuretics, or if they have a low intake of fluids, can exacerbate fluid loss, and it can make hyperthermia even worse in hot weather. So you need to be cautious of that for the elderly who are on those medications. Also, there are other medications, people with cardiovascular disease that are on beta blockers, antidepressants, anti-Parkinsonian drugs are also at risk. So hyperthermia is a temperature-related illness. It's classified as a medical emergency, and there's even, like in the nursing homes, there's regulations about what temperature has to be set on. And there are some tips in box 21.4 to prevent hyperthermia. Some suggestions are drink 2 to 3 liters of cool fluid daily and eat smaller, more frequent meals. Take cooler baths or showers, avoiding alcohol, wearing light, loose-fitting clothing, wearing a hat when outside, and staying in air conditioning or staying where that's available can be helpful. Hypothermia, which is the opposite of hyperthermia, is produced by exposure to a cold environment, and this is where a core temperature is less than 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. It is considered a medical emergency and requires assessment of neuroactivity, oxygenation, renal function, and fluid electrolyte balances. There are some different factors that increase the risk of hypothermia. So if you look at box 21.5, different conditions that decrease heat production and can cause more of a risk for hypothermia are hypothyroidism, hypopituitarism, hypoglycemia or low blood sugar, anemia, malnutrition, immobility or decreased activity. So this could be if someone has had a stroke, dementia, arthritis. So those are some conditions that can decrease the amount of heat that someone produces. Conditions that increase heat loss. So those decrease heat production, but some conditions that increase the heat loss or loss of heat are open wounds or any kind of inflammatory skin conditions. Conditions that impair central or peripheral control of thermoregulation. So they're not thermoregulating. This can happen with strokes, brain tumors, acute illnesses, as you are aware, congestive heart failure, pulmonary embolism, and then of course there are always medications that can affect thermoregulation, and this happens to be like some of the tranquilizers and sedatives and vasodilators. Older people are at a greater risk during and after disasters, and they do have the highest casualty rate during these natural disasters. You know, right now we've got getting ready for the hurricanes, so but it could be weather related, it could be fire, so there's also different sorts of natural disasters. But the elderly are less likely to seek help when they're affected by natural disasters. The older adults that tend to be at the highest risk are those that depend on someone else for their functioning. That includes people with limited mobility and those who are socially isolated or cognitively impaired. Nursing home residents are particularly vulnerable, and so it's really important that the nursing homes are prepared for any natural disasters. Transportation and or the lack of transportation is really, really important for the elderly people to be able to keep their independence. There is a crisis in mobility and transportation because of the lack of transportation, whether that be they don't have access to a car or they're not driving anymore. Maybe there's not any access to public transportation, or maybe they just don't have money for public transportation. But this can become really difficult. There are some federally subsidized programs that will help with transportation for like doctor's visits and emergency care, like for groceries, but this doesn't often include like recreational visits. So a lot of times lack of transportation can mean that the elderly person is socially isolated as well. We kind of touched on this on the last slide, but having affordable and adequate transportation services are really essential to health of the elderly person so they can get to their appointments and get to any treatments, as well as just quality of life. and the ability for them to age in place. If you remember back to the video we watched the first day in class, how they talked about how important transportation was for their ability to stay in their homes. I would like you guys to click on this, the website that's in here, and just go ahead and click on that. It should take you to something from the National Institute of Health, and this talks about safe driving for adults. Some things that can change the driving ability with an older adult is stiff muscles and joints like arthritis, difficulty with seeing or hearing that can make it difficult to drive, medications or anything that may cause a slower reaction time. And then there's some tips about helping others to drive safely, talking with your doctor, stay physically active, take care of eyes and ears so that you can safely drive, plan your timing, avoid heavy traffic times, wear seat belts, use window defrosters. So again, just good tips that are helpful for all of us. Driving is one of the instrumental activities of daily living, and we've already said that it's an essential, something that's really necessary. There are some adaptations that can be made to help with safer driving. If you look in box 21.8, pedal extensions, having a wider rear view mirror, having an electronic detector that signals when you're backing up and getting close to someone, better protection on the doors, or GPS devices can all help have an adaptation for safer driving. Driving is a highly complex activity. It requires good visual, motor, and cognitive skills. And as individuals age, the risk for impairment changes with aging. So you see just normal age changing things such as possibly low vision, difficulty hearing, and there are also disease related changes specific to certain diseases. Driving safety, when compared with younger age groups, older people have more accidents per mile driven and have a 9-fold increased risk of traffic fatality. Driving fatalities increase with age, and the risk of death for drivers 85 years and older is 9 times greater in a crash than it is for someone who's 69 years or younger. So you can see there's definitely an increased risk with the older the person becomes. If you want to look at box 21.9, there's some tips for driving safety. Include the person in all discussions about driving safety, evaluate medical conditions that could interfere with driving, maybe modify the driving habits like not driving at night, not driving in heavy traffic, discuss strategies that decrease the need to drive, including like maybe home delivered groceries, maybe mail order prescriptions, so just things that keep them from having to leave. And then maybe some vehicle adaptations that we talked about earlier. Driving with dementia. Driving is one of the top tough ethical issues associated with dementia, when they're okay to drive and when they're not okay to drive. There's been evidence of some studies of different motor vehicle crashes that suggest that drivers with dementia have at least a 2-fold risk of crashes compared to those without a cognitive impairment. So definitely seeing a higher risk for people that have dementia and drive. Legal regulations regarding driver's license renewal and older drivers, and the responsibility of practitioners to identify unsafe drivers vary from state to state and country to country. I'll have to look, but I do think that in Missouri, you have to renew as you get older, you have to renew your license more often. And then I wanted to draw your attention to the Silver Alert system, which is similar to the Amber Alert, but it is for an older adult. Giving up driving is a very major loss for an older person. It will really cut down on their independence, can also cut down on their feelings of self-worth, and can increase depression. Planning for There's not really a hard and fast rule for when they should stop driving, but it should happen before the situation becomes urgent, and it has to happen. And there are some tips. If you look on, there's some tips about driver cessation. And if you look on the bottom of page 277, it kind of discusses this. It says women are more likely than men to stop driving for less pressing reasons than health. So men tend to be a little bit more stubborn, and put a little bit more value on the ability to drive and owning a car. So you can expect more stress if you are trying to make this decision for an older or elderly man. A lot of times this falls to the family members to say, it's time to stop driving, and to provide that feedback. There have been advancements in technology that have been shown to improve quality of life and decrease the need for some types of personal care. It can enhance independence. Some examples of this include telehealth being one. Especially this happened during COVID, where telehealth became much more common. There are smart homes that can help, like with the use of an Alexa or a Google, that can help to run functions, and then different robots. The ones I'm thinking of off the top of my head are the Roombas for the vacuuming, but there's different robots that can do different things. And so this can all be helpful for the elderly adult as well. As far as aging in place goes, it's helpful to have elder-friendly communities that can increase the opportunity for them to age in place, and can lead to an increased health and well-being. So components of different elder-friendly communities address basic needs, optimize physical health and well-being, maximize independence, and provide social and civic engagement. And so this is where you've seen them. They have communities. Mostly it's elderly people who are living there. And a lot of times they'll offer like one meal a day, where you can go to a main area and have one meal a day, but then the rest of the time you're on your own. But they do have someone who will come and take care of the grounds and help with maintenance. So there's a limited amount of upkeep that they're required to do. This slide shows you some of the benefits of an elder-based community. So it addresses basic needs like safety. It provides appropriate housing, making sure that no one goes hungry. Optimizes mental health and well-being. It does increase socialization, because there is a community of people. There's access to preventative healthcare services and to medical needs services when they need it. Socially and civic engagement, it allows opportunities, and then it also maximizes the independence for the frail and disabled. A lot of times they're able to live at home if they live in one of these resources, and it does sometimes they can also offer transportation, which can be really helpful. This slide is similar to the last one. It just talks about the benefits of elder-friendly communities, providing services, having, obviously a majority of the people are elderly, but this can be co-housing communities, shared housing, a village housing model. So these are all beneficial. I'd like for you to click on this link. It'll take you to a page that has a bunch of safety tips for older adults. It addresses things like fire safety. It addresses things about falls. So I'd like for you to read this information and then include some of it in your 1-minute paper, a reference to this. Just some questions to help see what your understanding is. Hypothermia is defined as having a core body temperature of less than, and the answer is B, 95 degrees. A mildly elevated core temperature, being cool and clammy, altered mental status, and thirst are signs of, and the answer is C, heat exhaustion.